Welcome to my channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. A human man entered the most dangerous girl group in the galaxy and smiled. The smuggler's ship drifted through the void like a crippled insect, engines sputtering, hull shuddering from wounds it had no chance of healing. Its crew had already abandoned hope, which was precisely the moment the Crimson Sirens liked to strike. Their cruiser slid out of warp, a sleek thong of black metal with crimson glyphs etched across its hull. A ship whispered about in taverns and condemned in Senate halls. The Sirens did not simply raid, they performed. They boarded with elegance that belonged on a stage. Armor that shimmered like liquid metal, eyes burning with cold fire, long ears twitching as though they could hear the last heartbeats of their prey. They moved without hesitation, cutting through doors, cutting through men, cutting through the lies of smugglers who thought they might bargain. When the last body fell, silence claimed the corridors, broken only by the hum of plasma blades retracting. Lyrics, their captain, strode to the command deck. Her voice carried no need for volume. It was sharpened steel. Check every chamber. No survivors. The order had never failed them. Survivors led to rumors, and rumors led to weakness. Yet this time, in a forgotten cargo bay, they found something none of them expected. Not a cache of stolen plasma cells. Not a hidden warhead, just a man. He sat cross-legged on a crate, human by every visible feature, dusty brown hair and plain clothes. No armor, no weapon. His hands were resting on his knees as though he were meditating, though his posture suggested boredom more than serenity. When the siren stormed in, blades drawn, he looked up at them and smiled. "Well," he said, voice absurdly calm, "you're not the welcome committee I was promised. Unless this is one of those surprise vacation packages. Do I get a fruit basket?" The Sirens froze, which in itself was extraordinary. Fear was their currency, and they were accustomed to the instant return of wide eyes, screams, the stench of terror. This man's grin was a stone thrown into their still pool. One of the Sirens, tall and lean with ears sharpened into perfect points, narrowed her glowing eyes. "Do you know who we are?" she asked, her voice like frost on glass. "Sure," he said, as if discussing the weather. "The Crimson Sirens. Galaxy's most dangerous girl group. You're basically pop stars with more stabbing. I've heard your greatest hits, especially the one where you vaporized an admiral and 3 moon bases. Very catchy. 5 stars, would recommend." Another Siren, less patient, pressed her blade to his throat. He tilted his head back slightly, not in fear, but as though making room for her weapon. "Do you not value your life?" she hissed. "Oh, I do," he said cheerfully. "That's why I'd like to keep my throat in one piece. But honestly, if you're going to kill me, could you at least tell me if you have a more comfortable execution chamber? Maybe with pillows? I've always pictured my last moments in luxury." The Siren holding the blade twitched. It wasn't a laugh. None of them would dare, but it was dangerously close. Lyrics stepped forward before discipline crumbled further. She studied the man with eyes that had measured emperors and found them wanting. "You are human," she said flatly. "Unarmed. Trapped. You should be on your knees." He shrugged. "Knees are overrated. Terrible for posture. Besides, everyone kneels in front of you, right? I figured I'd try something new. Standing. Sitting. Smiling. Revolutionary, I know." The Sirens shifted uneasily. Some glared, some smirked despite themselves, but all of them felt the fracture in their unity. Fear was expected. This was foreign. Lyrics considered ending it immediately. A single motion, a single strike, and his smile would be erased. Yet something, curiosity, irritation, something dangerously close to amusement, stayed her hand. "Take him," she ordered. "Alive." The Sirens exchanged glances, surprise flashing in their eyes. They never took prisoners. Yet none dared question her, not aloud. The man stood up willingly, brushing dust from his trousers as if they were his hosts. "Great," he said. "Do I get a cabin? Maybe a tour of the ship? Please tell me there's a cafeteria. I skipped breakfast." One Siren jabbed him forward with her blade, but her lips twitched as though she wanted to smile. The man walked down the corridor between them like it was a parade, whistling an off-key tune that clashed with the silence of death that usually followed the Crimson Sirens. Back on their cruiser, the sirens gathered in the Chamber of Judgment. Lyrics sat upon the obsidian dais, her long ears angled forward like knives, her eyes locked on their peculiar guest. The others circled him, blades ready, tension thrumming through the air. He looked around, grinned wider, and said, "Wow, nice place. Love the decor. Very murder chic. Though, if I may suggest, a few throw pillows wouldn't kill you." Well, okay, bad choice of words. For the first time in cycles, silence in that chamber was broken not by screams or orders, but by a strangled sound suspiciously close to laughter. And in that moment, none of the Crimson Sirens realized that their greatest battle had already begun. Not against fleets, not against warlords, but against a single human smile. The Sirens had many rules, most of them carved from blood and fire. They never left survivors. They never took prisoners. They never, under any circumstance, allowed outsiders onto their ship unless that outsider was already a corpse. Yet there he was, alive and breathing, sitting in a chair in the center of their war room, as though he had stumbled into a job interview. He lounged with his arms resting on the sides, one leg crossed over the other. "So," he said brightly, "is this where I tell you my skills? Because I'm great with numbers. Not math numbers, more like knowing exactly how many bad guys are behind me without looking. It's a gift." The sirens ringed him in silence, their long ears angled like blades. One of them, sharp-tongued and quicker to temper than the others, finally snapped. "Do you mock us, human?" "Not at all," he said. "Mocking implies intent. This is natural talent. You wouldn't yell at a bird for chirping, right?" A ripple passed through the warriors. It was not laughter, not exactly, but it wasn't fury either. Something unsettled. Lyrics remained seated above them all, her hands folded, her expression carved from obsidian. She was the only one who had not reacted since his capture. "You will answer questions," she said at last. He gave her a little salute. "Shoot. Figuratively, please. Not literally. What is your name?" "Jalen," he said easily. "Though depending on who you ask, it's hey you. Wrong place, wrong time. Or my personal favorite, that idiot." "And why were you aboard the smuggler vessel?" "Cheaper than a cruise ship. Don't recommend the food, though. Unless you enjoy meals that double as industrial solvents." One siren snorted before quickly coughing to disguise it. Lyrics's gaze snapped toward her, a warning sharp enough to slice bone. Silence returned, heavy and suffocating, until Jalen leaned forward in his chair, his grin still maddeningly intact. "You know," he said, "you're all terrifying. The ears, the glowing eyes, the we kill without mercy vibe. Very effective branding. But has anyone ever told you that maybe you're too terrifying? Like, no one's ever going to invite you to a dinner party. And that's a shame, because I bet you'd have fascinating stories." One of the younger sirens tilted her head, curiosity slipping past discipline. "Dinner party?" "Yes," he said, seizing the opening. "Food, drinks, awkward small talk. Someone inevitably brings up politics and ruins everything. But before that, you get pie. You strike me as a pie people. Am I wrong?" Several pairs of glowing eyes flickered with something dangerous. Not rage, not bloodlust. Something closer to confusion, tinged with reluctant amusement. Lyrics rose from her seat, her presence filling the chamber like a storm. "You dare speak to us as though we are friends?" "Not friends yet," Jalen said. "More like co-workers who haven't realized they'd work better with an HR department." "HR, Human Resources," he explained, gesturing vaguely. "A mystical force that prevents your co-workers from stabbing you over coffee theft. You should try it. Revolutionized my old job." The sirens shifted again, uncertain whether to slice him apart or demand more explanation of this HR. Lyrics descended the dais slowly, her boots striking the floor with deliberate weight. She stopped before him, close enough that he could see his reflection in her burning eyes. "Tell me," she said softly, dangerously, "why do you not fear us?" Jalen held her gaze. He did not smile this time. "Because fear makes people predictable, and predictable people don't survive long in the galaxy. But you don't know what to do with me, and that gives me a better chance than begging ever would." The chamber held its breath. Lyrics studied him as though dissecting a puzzle she did not wish to admit fascinated her. Finally, she turned away. "Lock him in the observation cell," she ordered. A siren stepped forward, blade brushing his shoulder. Jalen stood, stretching casually as though he were about to be shown to a hotel suite. "Observation cell. Fancy. Do I get room service? Please say yes. I'd kill for coffee. Not literally. Don't look at me like that." As they escorted him down the metallic corridors, whispers rippled among the sirens. Some muttered that he was dangerous. Others scoffed that he was simply insane. Yet more than a few found themselves glancing at him longer than they intended. A man who did not tremble, did not plead, did not curse their names. Such a man was a crack in the armor of their legend. When the heavy door sealed behind him, Jalen flopped onto the cell's narrow bunk. He looked up at the ceiling camera and waved cheerfully. "Hey, I don't suppose you've got Wi-Fi, or at least a deck of cards. Solitary confinement gets pretty lonely without solitaire." The siren monitoring the feed covered her mouth quickly, pretending to cough. But she was smiling, and that was how the unity of the Crimson Sirens began to fracture. Not from fleets or empires, but from a single, unshakable human grin. Jalen's cell was supposed to be silent, a box of solitude meant to break the minds of captives long before the sirens cut their throats. Instead, noise spilled from it, constant talking, humming, half-sung songs about breakfast cereal that didn't exist. The sirens took turns monitoring him, each shift convinced they'd last longer than the last. None did. He wore them down not with pleas or threats, but with relentless absurdity. On the third day, one siren entered with a tray of nutrient paste. She was tall, severe, her ears angled like daggers. She placed a tray on the floor, without a word. Jalen leaned forward eagerly. "Ah, the famous siren cuisine. Let me guess, flavor profile. Despair with a hint of drywall." Her ears twitched. "It sustains you." "Sure," he said, scooping the paste with a finger. "But so does licking batteries. Not recommended, by the way. Learned that the hard way." She turned sharply, hiding the twitch of her lips as the door sealed behind her. The camera feed caught it anyway. Two more sirens exchanged a look they shouldn't have shared. Something was shifting. Lyrics noticed. She always noticed. From the bridge of the cruiser, she watched her warriors, with eyes honed to detect weakness. But what unsettled her most was not the crack in discipline. It was herself. She had caught her thoughts drifting to that smile, that infuriatingly calm man who dared to look her in the eye without flinching. The universe offered no time for contemplation. A warning klaxon blared as the ship jolted violently. Sirens rushed to their stations. Lyrics barked orders, her voice slicing through chaos. The view screen lit with the jagged silhouettes of syndicate warships dropping out of warp. Their weapons primed, their message clear. The Crimson Sirens had grown too unruly, too independent. The first barrage struck, rattling the cruiser. Shields flared, corridors groaned, sparks showered from consoles. Lyrics didn't hesitate. Battle stations. Return fire. The sirens obeyed with lethal precision, launching torpedoes, slicing through enemy fighters with beams of searing light. Yet the syndicate had come prepared. The assault was relentless, calculated to pin them down. In the chaos, a voice crackled over the comms that shouldn't have been there. "Hey, so, not to interrupt the whole epic space battle thing, but your observation cell isn't very explosion-proof. Should I be concerned?" It was Jalen, speaking through the cell's intercom as though commenting on the weather. Lyrics gritted her teeth. "How did you access this channel?" "Well, you left an old panel in here. Wires hanging out, very tempting. You can't dangle shiny buttons in front of a human and expect us not to press them. Anyway, turns out I'm good with circuits. Also, your firewalls are about as sturdy as wet tissue paper." Another blast rocked the ship. A siren shouted from the weapon station. "Captain, port shields collapsing." Jalen's voice cut in again, maddeningly calm. "I can reroute auxiliary power through the dorsal grid. Not standard practice, but it'll buy you a few minutes. Unless you'd prefer the whole glorious fiery death thing. Totally your call." Lyrics hesitated for half a heartbeat. A human offering tactical support? Ridiculous. And yet, do it, she snapped. Within moments, the power grid stabilized. Shields flared back to life, just as another volley struck. The ship held. The sirens glanced at one another, unease deepening. They had been saved not by their own captain, not by their own brilliance, but by the prisoner they had mocked. Great, Jalen said cheerfully. Now, if you could kindly not explode before lunch, that'd be awesome. Also, your wiring's a nightmare. Who designed this thing, drunk squirrels? One siren at the console actually choked back a laugh, before catching herself. Lyric saw it. She saw everything. The cracks widened. The battle raged on, but with Jalen's improvised reroutes, the sirens clawed back the upper hand. They punched a hole through the syndicate line, slipping into warp before the enemy could regroup. Silence returned, broken only by the hum of damaged systems. In the aftermath, Lyric strode to the observation cell. She entered alone, door sealing behind her. Jalen sat on the bunk, grinning as though he hadn't just meddled in a battle between titans. You should have killed me, he said lightly. Now your people will never stop arguing about me. I'm like glitter. You can't get rid of me once I've stuck. Lyric's eyes narrowed. You presume too much. Maybe, he said, but I'm alive. And they're curious. You're curious. Admit it. You're wondering why a human sits in the middle of the galaxy's deadliest assassins and smiles instead of screams. Her silence was an answer in itself. He leaned forward, lowering his voice just enough. Fear makes you predictable. But smiles? They make people wonder what you're planning. And right now, Captain, you're wondering if keeping me alive will destroy you or save you. Lyrics turned sharply and left without another word. Outside, her warriors waited. Some demanded his death. Others argued he might be useful. None agreed. The Crimson Sirens, once unbreakable, had found their first fracture line, and Jalen's smile was prying it open wider with every passing hour. The Crimson Sirens were silent killers, disciplined to the bone, but their silence had started to splinter. Whispers moved through the ship like contraband. Jalen's name, his grin, the way he had turned a syndicate ambush into a joke about squirrels and faulty wiring. Some sirens spoke of him with scorn, others with reluctant amusement, and a few with something far more dangerous. Lyrics summoned her officers to the war room. The table projected a holographic map of syndicate movements, sharp lines of red cutting across star systems. She explained the threat, the need for precision, the urgency of unity. Yet she could feel it. Her words skimmed over distracted minds. Their ears twitched, their eyes flicked toward the sealed corridor that led to the observation cell. When the meeting ended, she stayed behind, alone with the projection. She told herself she was reviewing strategies. She told herself she wasn't thinking about a human smile that lingered in her mind like an echo. Meanwhile, Jalen sat cross-legged on the floor of his cell, a collection of scavenged wires, screws, and panels spread before him. He had fashioned something that looked suspiciously like a toy robot with wobbly legs. When the door slid open and one siren entered to deliver his rations, the little contraption tottered toward her, emitting a squeaky voice. Welcome to Siren Airlines. Please keep your ears inside the vehicle at all times. The warrior blinked, utterly thrown off. Jalen grinned. I call him Gerald. He's unionized, so treat him well. She pressed her lips tightly together, failing to contain the twitch of a smile, before dropping the tray and leaving without a word. Later that cycle, alarms blared again. A syndicate probe had breached their perimeter. Sirens rushed to intercept, slicing through space with laser fire until the probe disintegrated in a burst of debris. But fragments of the probe embedded themselves in the hull, releasing swarms of mechanical drones that began drilling through corridors like metal termites. The sirens engaged instantly, blades flashing, energy bolts searing the air. But the drones adapted quickly, reshaping their armor, dispersing into smaller units. For every one destroyed, two more slipped into the vents. From his cell, Jalen heard the chaos. He tapped the intercom. So, quick question. Do you prefer your drones crispy or stir-fried? Because you've got an infestation problem. Lyrics' voice cut through. Silence. I'd love to, he said. But unless you've got a plasma net calibrated to disrupt adaptive microalloys, you're about to be neck-deep in bitey little robot bugs. Which, by the way, are terrible pets. 0 out of 10. Lyrics hesitated only a moment before ordering the cell opened. Jalen stepped out, stretching like a man leaving a long nap. Nice ship. Love what you've done with the killer robots in the hallways. Very modern. He knelt by a panel, yanking out wires with casual confidence. See, the trick with syndicate drones is that they all run on the same high frequency. Like bees. Me metallic bees. But if you hijack the signal... He twisted wires, sparks flying, the floor trembling as drones clattered closer. You can convince them the hive is somewhere else. Say outside the ship. The drones rounded the corner, metal limbs screeching. Sirens raised their weapons, but before they could strike, the machines froze. Then, as if beckoned, they swarmed back through the corridor and launched themselves out into the void, scattering like iron confetti. The silence afterward was thick, broken only by Jalen dusting off his hands. And that, ladies and very scary ladies, is what we humans call pest control. Several sirens stared at him in disbelief. One finally muttered, "Impossible." "Not impossible," Jalen corrected. "Just poorly guarded intellectual property." Back in the war room, the debate erupted. Some demanded his immediate execution, calling him a manipulator, a danger to discipline. Others argued he had saved them twice now, more effectively than some of their own tactics. Voices rose, ears angled like weapons, the air crackling with tension. Lyrics silenced them with a gesture, though even she could feel the split forming like a crack in ice. She turned to Jalen. "Why?" she asked. "Why help us?" "Because dying in a drone-infested tin can isn't on my bucket list," he said. Then softer. "And because I think you're better than the syndicate wants you to believe. You're not their weapons. You're people. Dangerous, terrifying people, sure, but still people." The sirens bristled. None had dared speak of them as anything but blades, shadows, executioners. Yet Jalen's words hung in the air, stubborn as gravity. Lyrics dismissed the others, keeping only him in the chamber. She circled him slowly, every step a predator's test. "You twist words like a knife," she said. "I prefer spoon," he replied. "Less messy. You undermine me before my warriors." "Not on purpose," he said. "Well, okay, a little on purpose. But mostly, I just tell the truth. And the truth is scarier than lies, isn't it?" Her eyes narrowed, burning brighter. She hated that part of her wanted to smile at his nonsense. Hated more that part of her wanted to listen. When she left him in the cell again, her warriors were already dividing into factions. Those who whispered about killing the human before he destroyed them from within, and those who found themselves replaying his jokes, his confidence, his defiance. For the first time in their long reign, the Crimson Sirens were not united by fear. They were split by something far more dangerous. And Jalen's grin from behind the cell door promised he knew exactly what he was doing. The syndicate came with everything. Not probes, not drones, not hunters in the dark. This time they arrived with fleets. Star destroyers unfolded from warp like jagged teeth around the Crimson Sirens' cruiser. Their message was clear: extermination. The Sirens braced for battle, but they were not braced for what already brewed inside their own hull. Arguments had spilled into open conflict. Some warriors sharpened their blades, whispering that Jalen was a curse, a weakness planted by the syndicate itself. Others clutched his name like a secret talisman, refusing to admit how his grin had rooted itself in their minds. Unity was gone, and without unity, they were nothing but a ship of killers waiting to die. In the middle of it all, Jalen strolled into the war room, hands shoved in his pockets. He glanced at the holographic display of a dozen syndicate capital ships and muttered, "Wow, that's optimistic. Do they think you're running a daycare center?" A few sirens hissed at him. One even drew her blade, but Lyrics raised her hand. Her eyes never left Jalen. "You should not be here." "Probably not," he admitted. "But let's be honest, if I stay locked up, you'll all implode before the syndicate even fires a shot. Half of you want me dead, half want me alive, and I'm just trying to survive long enough to taste something better than nutrient paste. So, call me crazy, but I think we should solve both problems at once. The chamber stilled. Even the hum of engines seemed to quiet. Explain, Lyrics demanded. Jalen tapped the hollow controls, rotating the fleet projection. The syndicate doesn't want to fight you. They want to make an example. You've been too independent, too scary to you. And nothing terrifies tyrants more than assassins with free will. They want you broken. He smirked. So let's not break. Let's perform. He outlined a plan so absurd it shouldn't have been possible. Broadcasting the sirens live across every open syndicate channel. Not as killers, not as soldiers, as legends. Terrifying, mocking, untouchable legends. A performance that would spread fear faster than any execution ever could. He called it theater with better lighting. Several sirens scoffed. Others leaned in, their ears twitching with reluctant intrigue. Lyrics' gaze narrowed. And what role do you play in this performance? Jalen grinned. Comic relief. The battle began with fire. Syndicate warships unleashed a storm, but the sirens moved as they always had, swift, merciless, a dance of plasma and blades. Only this time, their every move was amplified, streamed into every comms device in range. Jalen provided commentary from the command deck, his voice cutting through static like a bizarre announcer. Ladies and gentlemen of the galaxy, welcome to tonight's show. In the left corner, weighing in at approximately too many tons of steel, we have the Syndicate, and in the right corner, the undefeated champions of chaos, the Crimson Sirens. Place your bets now, but I warn you, odds are terrible for the Syndicate. Across 1,000 systems, civilians, smugglers, even Syndicate soldiers stopped to watch. They saw assassins slicing through fleets with terrifying grace. Yes, but they also heard laughter. Jalen's irreverent humor painted the sirens not as shadows in the dark, but as forces too unpredictable to ever control. The Syndicate faltered, their carefully crafted aura of dominance cracked as confusion spread. Was this a battle or a performance? Were the sirens mocking them or destroying them? Both, it seemed. And that uncertainty was poison. Inside the cruiser, something changed too. The sirens fought harder, sharper, but they also fought freer. For the first time, they were not weapons wielded by someone else's will. They were performers of their own legend. And though they rolled their eyes at Jalen's commentary, yes, that was a triple flip before the decapitation, very stylish. They also smirked, ears twitching, fire in their eyes. Hours later, the Syndicate fleet limped away, humiliated, their channels flooded with recordings they could never erase. The Crimson Sirens had survived. More than survived, they had become untouchable myths. After the smoke cleared, Jalen sat on the edge of the war table, swinging his legs like a child on a bench. The sirens stood around him, divided no longer. Some glared, others smiled faintly, but none raised blades. Lyrics stepped forward. You changed them, she said. Jalen tilted his head. Nah, I just reminded them they could be more than fear. Her eyes searched his face, her long ears angled in thought. And you, human? What are you now? He paused, the smile softening. Someone who stopped running. Someone who finally found a stage big enough for all the jokes. The sirens laughed, not all, but enough. Laughter among killers, once unthinkable, now undeniable. From that day, the galaxy spoke of the Crimson Sirens not only with fear, but with awe. They were assassins, yes, but also performers, tricksters, legends wrapped in blood and laughter. And always, at the center of their myth, was the human man who smiled when no one else dared. For Jalen, it wasn't survival anymore. It was belonging. And for the deadliest women in the galaxy, it was the beginning of something more dangerous than war, a future they had chosen for themselves. The end.